The galactic assembly of sentient beings was, as usual, an overwhelming display of cosmic absurdity. Picture a grand hall teeming with life forms at the pinnacle of evolution, each convinced they were the universe's supreme achievement. Now imagine the cacophony of bureaucratic maneuvers, political posturing, and a maze of translation devices that would make the most advanced computer system weep. But today was special. Today, the Dreadwraiths were making their entrance. The colossal doors to the assembly chamber swung open with an air of spectacle that even the most elaborate galactic theater could not match. Emerging into the room were three enormous figures, their presence enough to make every ambassador's survival instinct scream in alarm. The Dreadwraiths were, without exaggeration, the kind of nightmare that could be conjured from a predator's darkest fantasies. Nearly 3 meters tall, their obsidian-like exoskeletons gleamed under the lights, revealing muscles honed to perfection beneath an organic armor that was grown, not forged, because mere scales simply weren't fearsome enough. For eyes, glowing with an unsettling bioluminescence, studied the chamber with a calculating, reptilian malice. Each of their 4 limbs ended in talons sharp enough to carve through the hulls of starships. But it was their smiles, sharp and serrated with rows of teeth that seemed to mock the very idea of a chainsaw, that truly made other species recoil in terror. Ambassador Vren of the Aegis Concordia fainted the moment the Dreadwraiths entered. It was no surprise. Even the bravest officials felt their pulse quicken at the sight of these living embodiments of death. "We come to claim our seat at this council," intoned the lead Dreadwraith, a being named Carr. His voice rumbled deep enough to make the chamber's crystal chandeliers tremble, as if shivering from cold. "As is our right, as the galaxy's apex predators." The assembled delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats, each debating whether they should be the one to challenge the Dreadwraiths for skipping the endless paperwork required for attendance. The bureaucratic assembly of Ivara would surely implode if the right protocols weren't observed. But all eyes were suddenly fixed on their data pads, pretending that they hadn't just heard that declaration. The Dreadwraiths took their self-designated seats in the center of the room, leaving several smaller races scrambling to request reassignments as far away as possible. Carr's voice sliced through the uneasy silence. "We seek to discuss the allocation of hunting territories. We require—" Before he could finish, the chamber doors creaked open once more. A trio of figures walked in, looking completely out of place. Humans. They stood casually in what appeared to be formal yet relaxed attire, as if preparing for a business conference rather than a gathering of the most powerful species in the galaxy. The lead human, a tall man with the name tag Tom emblazoned across his chest, was munching on a sandwich, bits of lettuce and cheese clinging to his tie as he walked. His colleague glanced over, frowning at the snack. "Is that a turkey club?" she asked, incredulous, while eyeing the deadly predators taking center stage. "Yeah," Tom replied, waving the sandwich in the air as if it were an item of great importance. "The replicators are still glitchy, so I've been eating this all day. Want a bite?" The Dreadwraiths looked at one another in genuine confusion, their expressions flickering from rage to something approximating befuddlement. These soft, feeble creatures dared to act so casually in the presence of the galaxy's most lethal predators. "You dare disrupt the council with such trivialities?" Carr growled, his voice making the walls of the chamber shake. The air was filled with tension that crackled like lightning. "Oh, sorry," Tom said, eyes lighting up as he wiped crumbs from his shirt. "We were hoping to pitch an idea." Ever considered a cultural exchange? Specifically, how do you feel about barbecued meat? Silence fell so profound that even the ambient energy field seemed to pause. The delegates exchanged looks that could only be described as a mix of horror and disbelief. One of the other humans pulled out a small, handheld device that displayed a calendar. We were thinking Thursday. The embassy just received a shipment of this incredible grill from Earth's southern states. You guys haven't lived until you've tasted slow-cooked brisket, the human added, smiling at the baffled predators. Carr blinked, his four eyes moving in unison. For the first time in recorded history, confusion spread across the Dreadwraiths' visages. These creatures, so soft, so fragile, were proposing a dinner party, and not one filled with fear, but with relish and enthusiasm. Before Carr could regain his composure, one of his subordinates, a creature named Tyloth, snapped, "You dare speak to us, the apex hunters, with such levity?" Tom took another bite of his sandwich, as if this were the most normal thing in the galaxy. "Yeah, but you gotta try the brisket. We call it Texas barbecue. It's so good. We once threw a whole festival just for it." Vren, who had awoken to the scene, whispered to a nearby delegate, "Are they serious? Is this some elaborate act to throw us off?" Carr's body shifted as he activated the natural bioluminescent threat display that sent shivers of warning throughout the room. Patterns of vibrant, threatening colors rippled across his exoskeleton. "You address us with utter disrespect, puny prey." "Oh, whoops," Tom said, brushing crumbs off his lap. "Would you like the rest of this? It's not the best sandwich in the galaxy, but it's pretty good. No worries, though. Next Thursday, you'll see how we do it at our place." Ever heard of ghost peppers? Those are our opening act. The chamber fell silent as the Dreadwraiths muttered in confusion. The other delegates, already taken aback, now began to place bets on just how long the humans would survive this display of power and defiance. But as Carr's four limbs quivered, a thought began to take root, one that would lead to an unexpected future. Perhaps, just perhaps, these odd, soft-skinned beings were not to be dismissed so easily. Maybe their bravado was not the sign of folly, but the mark of something deeper, something that would change everything. And so, the day began the peculiar tale of how the most ferocious hunters of the galaxy came to sit at a dinner table, poised between rage and bewilderment, as humans casually introduced them to a new kind of feast. The day of the feast arrived, shrouded in a tension so palpable that even the chamber walls seemed to hum with anticipation. The Grand Assembly Hall had been transformed. The crystalline structure of the room, known for its gleaming, geometrically perfect symmetry, now looked like the setting for a bizarre fusion of ancient ritual and modern celebration. Long tables, crafted from a rare metal mine from the core of a dead star, were set with a mix of ceremonial dishes and modest Earth-style plates. At the far end of the hall, a massive grill that looked like it could cook a moon's worth of food stood proudly, its metallic surface glistening under the overhead lights. The Dreadwraiths arrived in their customary formation, their presence commanding silence from the assembled beings. Carr led the group, his formidable physique casting an intimidating shadow over the room. This time, though, the Dreadwraiths were not alone. They were flanked by their most loyal aides, who murmured among themselves, eyes flicking toward the grill with something that could almost be described as curiosity. The humans, meanwhile, were busy at work. Tom was directing a team of engineers from their embassy, adjusting the heat settings and brushing marinades on racks of meat. His colleague, Carla, was overseeing a collection of side dishes, baked beans, cornbread, and a dish that, judging by its color, involved some kind of exotic fruit. The third human, Miles, had been assigned to prepare the spice blends, which involved mixing ghost peppers with various other herbs and seasoning powders. Carr's eyes followed the humans with unnerving focus. The sight of them wielding strange tools and manipulating fire did not align with his species' understanding of what prey should be doing. A small part of him, the part that whispered to his species' instincts, itched with unease. "What are they doing?" one of his aides asked, flicking a clawed finger toward the humans. "Preparing food, I assume," replied Tyloth, his voice skeptical and edged with disbelief. He stared at the grill with a mixture of loathing and intrigue. "They think they can challenge us with this? Challenge? No, we invited them," Carr murmured, eyes narrowing. He was torn between acknowledging the strange challenge of the situation and dismissing it outright as folly. Yet there was something in Tom's casual demeanor, in the way he adjusted the fire's heat with a nonchalant grin, that made Carr hesitate. "Dreadwraiths, we must maintain our dignity," Tyloth warned. "They are beneath us. If we show weakness—" Before he could finish, the room's quiet was broken by a sudden cheer from the human contingent. The scent of smoke, meat, and spices enveloped the hall, sending a wave of new, unfamiliar sensations across the gathered beings. "Dinner is served," Tom announced, his voice bright, as if he were presenting the most prestigious offering. The assembly watched as humans dished out portions of slow-cooked brisket, ribs slathered in tangy sauce, and a side of potato salad so artfully arranged it looked almost regal. Carla passed out plates, her hands steady as she scooped generous portions for the Dreadwraiths. Carr stepped forward, his eyes meeting Tom's as if the two were engaged in a silent battle of wills. Tom offered a small, confident smile, as if daring Carr to refuse the invitation. "Take a seat," Tom said, motioning to the long table. The Dreadwraiths exchanged looks that spoke volumes. Doubt, irritation, and even a hint of something else that was hard to identify. But one by one, they sat, their massive bodies creating an intimidating contrast against the delicate, human-crafted silverware and ceramic plates. The chamber filled with a buzz of hushed murmurs and curious glances. Ambassadors and representatives from species whose names were too complex for most humans to pronounce watched as the Dreadwraiths, the very apex of predators, hesitated before the food laid out before them. Finally, Carr reached out, his clawed hand trembling slightly, and picked up a piece of brisket. The room fell silent as he brought it to his mouth, the other Dreadwraiths watching him with an intensity that bordered on religious awe. He took a bite, and for a moment, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. Then his eyes widened, the bioluminescence flaring brightly with an unanticipated reaction. He chewed thoughtfully, the deep growl in his throat shifting to something that could almost be called a purr. "By the stars," Carr said, his voice low and reverberating with astonishment. This is barbecue," Tom said, beaming. "Took a long time to get the flavors just right. The key is patience and a lot of love." The Dreadwraiths exchanged glances, their fierce features now softened with a hint of intrigue. A few of them reached for more food, ignoring their pride as they experimented with flavors they'd never known. The powerful being known as Tyloth grabbed a rib, his talons slicing through the meat with surprising delicacy. "Never before has prey offered us such sustenance," he muttered, eyes reflecting an odd mix of reverence and disbelief. For the other delegates, this moment was more than surreal. It was history in the making. The Dreadwraiths, known for their ruthless, unforgiving nature, were tasting food offered by the very beings they'd hunted in the past. And the humans? They sat back, eating with relish and waiting for the inevitable questions that would follow. "So," Tom said, wiping barbecue sauce from his fingers, "any questions about how we hunt? We've got some really fascinating records from our history. Like that time we hunted mammoths. Oh, and the saber-toothed tigers. Those were wild." Carr, still savoring the taste, looked up at Tom with an expression that only an apex predator could muster. Respect mingled with a twinge of wariness. "Tell us more about this hunt of which you speak, human." And thus, as the galaxy's most feared hunters found themselves drawn into the story of humanity's stubborn will to survive, the seeds of a new, improbable alliance were sown. It was the start of a relationship that would blur the lines between predator and prey, shifting the balance of power in ways no one could predict. The feast continued, and with it, an entire galaxy's view of what it meant to be a predator and what it meant to be human. The days following the barbecue were filled with an electrifying sense of change. The galactic media was ablaze with the news. The Dreadwraiths, the apex predators of the galaxy, had tasted Earth's barbecue and found themselves intrigued. While some speculated that the Dreadwraiths were merely playing a game to draw the humans into a false sense of security, others couldn't ignore the shift in the predators' behavior. Rumors spread like wildfire that Carr had even requested a second helping of the slow-cooked brisket. Ambassador Vren, who had previously passed out at the sight of the Dreadwraith's arrival, was now sitting in his office, staring at the latest interstellar news broadcast with a mix of disbelief and awe. His datapad chimed as a message from his aide arrived. Meeting request from Carr, Dreadwraith High Commander. Vren hesitated, then activated the holocom. A shimmering projection of Carr materialized in front of him, massive and imposing even in holographic form. The Dreadwraith's bioluminescent patterns flickered as he spoke, his voice like rolling thunder. Ambassador Vren, we request an audience with your council. Vren swallowed hard. The Dreadwraiths were not known for negotiating, let alone making requests. Yet here they were, asking for diplomacy. Of course, High Commander. We'll prepare the hall for your arrival. The Grand Assembly Hall was buzzing with an anxious energy as representatives and delegates gathered. The Dreadwraiths arrived in force, their dark, glistening forms even more imposing in the soft glow of the hall's artificial lights. Carr moved forward, his eyes searching the crowd as if assessing each being's worth. Beside him, Tylotha's eyes darted about, his usual scorn tempered with the unfamiliar emotion of curiosity. Tom, Carla, and Miles sat in a row, their faces radiating casual confidence. The other delegates watched the humans with a mix of admiration and fear. The humans had managed to charm the Dreadwraiths, an accomplishment few believed possible. We have come to discuss more than mere territories, Carr announced, voice deep and resonant, cutting through the murmur in the room. We have come to discuss the future of our galaxy. We have been enlightened. A stunned silence followed. Vren stood up, his heart pounding. Enlightened? By what? High Commander. By your kind, Carr replied. His eyes locked with Tom's, as if the human's presence were the catalyst for the revelation. We have hunted for centuries, seeing ourselves as the apex, the rulers of this domain. But at your table, we tasted something more potent than the thrill of the hunt. We tasted camaraderie, and we realized there is more to power than domination. A low rumble of whispers swept through the assembly. Some species exchanged glances of shock, others of disdain. But for the first time, a few beings were staring at the humans with a glimmer of hope, the kind that comes when an impossible idea takes root. Tom leaned forward, his smile wide and warm. So, does that mean you're ready to talk about alliances, maybe even trade agreements? We could set up joint hunting expeditions, you know? We've got some incredible wilderness areas back on Earth. A ripple of nervous laughter traveled through the room, but Carr's eyes never left Tom's. We are willing to discuss cooperation, Carr said, his voice lowering to a rumble. But first, we wish to understand the human way of life, your stories, your history, your spirit. Carla stood up, her eyes bright. That's why we're here, actually. We've got a whole presentation lined up on human resilience and history. There are stories you'd never believe, stories that'll make you see us in a different light. The assembly watched, stunned, as Carla and Miles connected their portable data projectors to the chamber's main display. Images flickered to life, showing Earth's wild landscapes and the creatures that once roamed them. There were mammoths and saber-toothed tigers, followed by images of humans hunting them, faces fierce with determination and camaraderie. Footage of ancient tribes, battling storms and each other, flashed across the screen. Then came the more recent history. Spacefaring humans building colonies, surviving harsh environments, overcoming the odds time and time again. The Dreadwraiths watched with their four eyes, their expressions shifting from confusion to what could only be described as fascination. Tyloth, ever the skeptic, leaned forward and whispered to Carr, "Are they truly this relentless?" Carr's reply came after a long pause. "They are, and we have underestimated them for too long." The chamber was now buzzing with energy, whispers of shock and awe blending with questions and speculation. A few smaller species even began to approach the humans with hesitant smiles, curious about the stories they were telling. But not everyone was so quick to embrace this strange turn of events. The High Council of the Equari, a species known for their political maneuvering, exchanged glances full of thinly veiled concern. One of them, Ambassador Cyril, whispered to a colleague, "If the Dreadwraiths shift their focus from conquest to cooperation, it changes everything. We must act before it's too late." At that moment, Tom glanced up, catching Cyril's worried look. With a grin, he called out, "Hey, Cyril, you're up next to tell us about your people's greatest hunt. We're all ears." Cyril's eyes narrowed, but even as he prepared to speak, a small, uneasy smile tugged at the corner of his lips. He wasn't sure what this new era would bring, but he knew one thing. The galaxy was no longer the same. As the gathering continued, conversations shifted from tension to cautious excitement. Plans were drafted, alliances considered, and the first human Dreadwraith cooperation project was discussed, an unprecedented endeavor involving Earth's top hunters and the Dreadwraiths, bound by a newfound respect and a shared love for the thrill of the hunt. No one knew where this path would lead, but as the sun set over the metallic horizon of the Grand Assembly Hall, the galaxy held its breath. An alliance forged in fire, meat, and shared history had begun to reshape the fate of all who called the stars their home. And so, the story of how humans made apex predators their dinner guests continued, as every being wondered just what this unpredictable species would do next. The days that followed the historic meeting had been anything but ordinary. News of the Dreadwraiths' unexpected alliance with the humans spread like an interstellar wildfire, igniting discussions and debates in every corner of the galaxy. Some species celebrated, seeing it as the dawn of a new era where brute power could coexist with cooperation. Others, particularly those with old grudges against the Dreadwraiths or a deep-rooted fear of humanity's unpredictable nature, saw it as a potential catastrophe in the making. For Tom, Carla, and Miles, life at the embassy had become a whirlwind of invitations, media requests, and political maneuvering. They spent long hours in meetings, explaining Earth's customs, sharing their most daring tales of survival, and fielding questions from curious delegates. The Dreadwraiths, meanwhile, had begun to integrate into the daily operations of intergalactic politics, their appearance no longer a source of terror, but a sign of their newfound interest in collaboration. Today, the humans were in the Grand Assembly Hall once again, preparing for what Tom had jokingly referred to as the Great Hunter Exchange. The Dreadwraiths had accepted the offer of hunting Earth's most formidable creatures, a concept that had set the entire galaxy buzzing with a mix of wonder and fear. And it wasn't just about Earth's animals. This was a show of trust, an invitation to explore humanity's strength and resilience firsthand. "Everything's set," Miles said, his fingers flying over the touch interface of the data console. He stood at the center of a table covered with maps, images of wildlife reserves, and diagrams showing different terrains. The Dreadwraiths are scheduled to arrive at the high plains of Kalen on Terra 2 at sundown. We've prepped the herd of mountain lions and the ridge wolves. Should be a real challenge. Carla's eyes sparkled with anticipation. If they survive that, we'll know they're serious. If they can't handle mountain lions, they're going to have a real problem with the jaguar packs. Tom looked at the others with a grin. It's all in good fun, right? Just a way to show off what we've got and prove we're more than just our appetites. His joke earned a chuckle from Carla and an amused smirk from Miles, but a low rumble echoed in the distance. It wasn't the sound of an approaching storm. It was the vibration of the Dreadwraiths entering the hall. Carr stood tall at the entrance, flanked by Tyloth and two other commanders. The sight of them silenced the room once again. This time, however, there was no dread, only curiosity and cautious optimism. Carr's four eyes fell on Tom as he approached. The High Commander nodded with a slight, almost imperceptible smile. "We are prepared," Carr declared, his voice steady and resonant. "Our honor will be tested, but we trust that this trial will be worth the risk." Tom exchanged a glance with Carla and Miles. This was it. The test that would either cement the fragile alliance or shatter it into a pile of cosmic dust. The sun was beginning its descent over Terra 2's high plains as the assembly of intergalactic observers settled into their makeshift viewing platforms. Species of every kind, some with feathered heads, others with chitinous exoskeletons, watched with anticipation. The vast plains stretched to the horizon, grass swaying in the gentle wind, dotted with tall, weathered trees and shallow pools of glistening water. At the heart of this majestic landscape was the hunting ground, a thriving ecosystem alive with the subtle thrum of hidden movement. The mountain lions had already been relocated here, their senses on high alert. The ridge wolves, sleek and lean, prowled the periphery, eyes glinting with predatory hunger. The humans stood with the Dreadwraiths, each group sizing up the other. Tom's voice broke the tension. "So, any questions? There are no rules, just show respect for the prey. And remember, the wilderness plays by its own rules." Carr's eyes met Tom's, and for a moment, they seemed to understand one another. "We are ready," Carr said. "All right," Miles said, flicking a switch on a nearby console. A low hum of energy signaled the start of the hunt. The observers' holoscreens activated, projecting the scene to millions of viewers across the galaxy. The first sound to break the silence was the sudden burst of movement. A pack of mountain lions, sleek and sinewy, emerged from the tall grasses. Their eyes locked onto the Dreadwraiths, the apex predators of their own realm, now here to prove themselves in a different arena. The Dreadwraiths, undeterred by the roar of Earth's creatures, broke into motion, their bodies moving with a surprising grace for beings of their size. What followed was nothing short of breathtaking. The Dreadwraiths shifted between the ranks of the mountain lions, moving like liquid shadows, muscles rippling beneath the obsidian scales. But the lions were fierce, their speed and coordination showing why they ruled the plains. Carr lunged forward, his claws outstretched, narrowly missing a lion that darted past him with the agility of a living spirit. The fight was fierce, brutal, and beautiful in its savagery. The humans watched with bated breath, each member of the embassy unable to look away from the primal spectacle. Tom whispered to Carla, "They're learning. Fast." Carla nodded, eyes wide as she watched Carr wrestle a mountain lion, a look of awe and respect passing over the Dreadwraith's face as the creature fought with relentless determination. "They're testing themselves," she said, understanding the deeper meaning behind the scene. "This isn't just about survival. It's about proving something to themselves, to us, and to the galaxy." The sun dipped below the horizon as the hunt concluded. The Dreadwraiths stood tall, breathing heavily, their chests heaving. The mountain lions, now a part of the natural cycle once more, vanished into the night with silent, knowing gazes. Carr looked around, his eyes now sharp with a new recognition, a bond forged in the fires of respect and battle. "Earth has not failed us," he said, his voice resonating with a strange humility. And as the night settled in, casting a deep, indigo hue over the plains, the galaxy watched and waited, understanding that they were witnessing not just the strength of predators, but the dawn of an alliance that could change everything. The challenge of unity had begun, and it was just the first of many battles to come. The days following the hunt were a whirlwind of interstellar celebrations and careful negotiations. The Dreadwraiths, who had long stood as untouchable emblems of pure might, were no longer feared as much as they were respected. Even those who had once dismissed the humans as reckless, naive newcomers were beginning to reconsider their stance. The galaxy was abuzz with the possibilities of this new alliance, and no one was more eager to learn what came next than the species that had lived under the Dreadwraith shadow for centuries. The Dreadwraiths had retreated to their private quarters in the central compound of the galactic capital. The massive chambers were lined with obsidian and adorned with bioluminescent patterns that shifted in rhythm with the beings inside. Carr sat at the head of a long, curved table, flanked by Tyloth and two of his most trusted commanders. They were speaking in their native tongue, a guttural, shifting language filled with clicks and rumbles that few species could comprehend. "We have found something," Carr said, his voice low and reflective. His eyes met Tyloth's, and for the first time, there was no hint of the cold, calculating hunter. There was a glint of something else, something primal and deeply compelling, something that will change us. These humans, they possess a taste for life unlike any we have seen. Tyloth's dark eyes narrowed, and he leaned forward. And yet, they are so fragile. Why do you want to keep playing these games with them? Why not just show them who we are and take what we want? Carr's bioluminescent patterns shifted from deep red to a subdued blue, a sign of his thoughtful contemplation. To rule is not enough. To subjugate is a victory hollow and brief. I have seen what they hold, the power of determination, the strength that comes from shared purpose. It is a power that cannot be conquered by claw or sword alone. Tyloth's eyes shifted uneasily, and he glanced at the others, who were now muttering amongst themselves. And what if this power corrupts them? They have already managed to defy expectations once. How do we know they will not become a threat? Carr's voice grew harder, a rumble that carried across the room. Then we shall test them, but not through battle. Let them prove themselves in a different way, through diplomacy, trade, and mutual trials. Let them see what it means to be more than just hunters. And let the galaxy see it too. Meanwhile, back at the human embassy, the trio of Tom, Carla, and Miles was preparing for their next big presentation. This one was different from the last. It wasn't just an introduction to Earth's way of life. It was an invitation. The humans had proposed an exchange where the Dreadwraiths would learn the arts of Earth's most formidable warriors, not in combat, but through storytelling, history, and culture. It was a bold idea that had drawn both skeptical frowns and fervent interest from the other species. Do you really think they'll go for this? Miles asked, adjusting his tie in front of the mirror. I mean, they're apex predators. They're not exactly known for being receptive. Tom was pacing, his mind running over the checklist. They've already surprised us. If they've got this much respect for our hunting, then maybe they'll respect our history too. We're not just strong. We're clever, creative. That's our real power. Carla crossed her arms, giving Tom a look. Just don't tell them about the time you and your cousin tried to wrestle a bear with a fishing net. Tom smirked, remembering. That was one time, and it was only because I had to prove I could do it, okay? Carla rolled her eyes. Yeah, and you almost got yourself killed. Let's make sure the Dreadwraiths don't try anything like that. Their conversation was interrupted by the chime of the communicator. It was Vren, the Centurion ambassador. He appeared as a hologram, his blue skin shimmering with impatience. Humans, the Dreadwraiths have agreed to join your presentation. The entire council is watching. This is a moment of immense significance. I hope you're ready. Tom and Carla exchanged a look before nodding. We're ready, Carla said, her voice steady. Then let the galaxy see the true story of Earth, Vren said before the transmission cut. The Grand Hall was filled with representatives from every corner of the galaxy. Delegates who had once whispered about the humans' recklessness now sat forward in their seats, eager to see what this unlikely alliance would bring. The Dreadwraiths entered, their presence larger than life, their bioluminescent patterns rippling with anticipation. Tom, Carla, and Miles stood at the center, flanked by holographic projections ready to come to life. Tom stepped forward, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. The Dreadwraiths were watching, their eyes flickering with an unspoken challenge. Thank you for joining us, Tom said. Today, we're going to share with you the stories that define us. Stories that prove our strength isn't just in our bodies, but in our minds and hearts. Stories that show why, even in the darkest of times, we find a way to rise. He waved a hand, and the first holographic image projected into the air. An ancient mural of humans running through thick forests, their spears raised as they faced a mammoth much larger than any Dreadwraith could imagine. The crowd gasped, and even the Dreadwraiths shifted on their talon-tipped feet. Carla's voice cut through the murmurs, steady and fierce. This is the story of Earth's greatest hunters. Not just those who take, but those who adapt, who survive. The mammoth was a challenge, yes, but it was more than that. It was a test of our willpower, a moment that said, we will not be beaten. The image shifted to cave paintings of humans grouped together, their faces painted with ochre and black, hunting in unison. The Dreadwraiths watched, their expressions unreadable but focused, and for the first time, they felt something strange in their chest cavity, a rumbling that was neither hunger nor rage, curiosity. Miles spoke next, his tone lighter, but no less compelling. And it wasn't just the hunt, it was the spirit we carried, the determination that made us who we are. You've seen our hunting, and now you'll see our art, our resilience, our tales of survival that span generations. The projections changed, depicting scenes of Earth's great explorers. A storm-tossed ship, a tiny figure reaching the peak of a mountain, a group of humans stepping foot on the moon for the first time. The assembly was silent, caught in the spell of the story. Even the Dreadwraiths were still, their powerful forms standing rigid as their minds took in what they were seeing. Finally, Tom spoke the last line. We don't just hunt to survive. We hunt to thrive, to push against the limits, to build, to grow, and to learn. That's our strength. And if you choose to walk this path with us, you may find that it's not the hunt itself that defines us, but what we do when we've caught our prey. The Dreadwraiths stood silent for a moment, and then, in a flash of bioluminescent blue and white, Carr let out a single, deep laugh. It was not one of mockery or derision, but of recognition, an understanding that what the humans offered was not weakness, but a different kind of power. The galaxy had been watching, and now it waited, breathless, to see what came next. And for the first time in centuries, Carr and his kin were ready to listen. The days that followed the humans' presentation were a mix of wonder and apprehension. The Dreadwraiths, known across the stars as the unyielding apex of predatory supremacy, had not only listened, but had spoken in turn. Carr himself had appeared at the human embassy, a rare and almost unprecedented gesture, and spoken to Tom, Carla, and Miles. You speak of the hunt not just as an end, but as a path. We have been blind, seeking only to dominate without understanding. Show us, then, what it means to be more than a predator. Show us the path you walk. It had been a challenge that could not be ignored. Earth's representatives had agreed without hesitation, and soon, an unprecedented event was set in motion. A trial of fire, a test not of claws and teeth, but of courage, endurance, and the strength of their shared spirit. The great hall where the trial was to take place had been transformed. Once a room where the mere presence of the Dreadwraiths had struck fear into the hearts of delegates, it now thrummed with the combined anticipation of countless species. The walls were lined with emissaries, diplomats, scholars, and leaders of every stripe. But in the center, under a great dome of polished crystal, stood the humans and the Dreadwraiths, side by side, facing a challenge that was as symbolic as it was brutal. The Trial of Fire was simple in concept. It was a race of will and heart, a contest of surviving the elements, facing obstacles designed to test every ounce of resolve. It would be a journey across a simulated world, a replica of Earth's most unforgiving terrain, with raging rivers, jagged mountains, and dark forests where echoes of roars and screeches would haunt every step. Carr stood at the edge of the arena, his scales reflecting the cold blue of the overhead lights. His eyes, usually filled with an inescapable, ruthless light, were now narrowed with what could only be described as curiosity. Beside him, Tyloth looked like he might burst from the tension. His tail lashed back and forth as he watched the humans prepare. Tom, who was often the nervous one in their trio, stood taller than he ever had before. His eyes met Carr's, and for a fleeting second, the ancient predator seemed to see not just the man in front of him, but the history of Earth itself. The wars, the triumphs, the boundless spirit of survival. The gong of a distant bell echoed through the hall, and the race began. The humans pushed forward, their bodies moving as fluidly as a wave, drawing from every ounce of strength they had. They were joined by the Dreadwraiths, their movements more like a machine's than any living creatures. Yet, as the race wore on and the simulated landscape grew treacherous, the true test revealed itself. Miles struggled against a fierce current, gripping a thick rope that would lead him to a safe ledge. He glanced over his shoulder and saw Tyloth, the most aggressive of the Dreadwraiths, charging forward, claws slicing through the water. Their eyes met, and for a moment, a flash of recognition passed between them. Tyloth was driven by instinct, but Miles was driven by something more, the memory of his grandfather's stories, of the times when a fire was passed from hand to hand, teaching resilience. Carla sprinted across a field of jagged rocks, the sun beating down as she leaped from one outcrop to the next. Her heart pounded as a sudden screech came from behind, a wild, shadowy beast. The Dreadwraiths were watching, and though they showed no emotion, the air felt heavy, electric with their anticipation. And then it happened. Tom reached the final obstacle, a sheer, vertical wall of glistening black stone. It was designed to break the spirit, to sap the will of even the strongest. He stared up at the impossible climb, his muscles screaming for relief. He remembered the way his grandmother, after a long day of teaching children to fish, would pause on the porch and smile. "You've got to want it more than you're afraid, Tom," she would say. And for the first time, he felt that ancient truth surge through him. With a primal roar that echoed in the chamber, he leapt. Hands scraped against the rock, feet finding fleeting footholds. He made it, and as his hand closed around the last ledge, he looked down to see Carr staring up at him, his 4 eyes wide in astonishment. One by one, the humans completed the trial, their bodies battered and broken, but their spirit unyielding. The Dreadwraiths, who had never before encountered such defiance without the risk of death, were speechless. Carr stepped forward, and the room fell silent. "You have shown us strength," he said, his voice resonant, unlike any sound that had ever come from his lips. "Not just the strength of your bodies, but of your will. We have hunted and ruled the stars, but we have never known this power." The silence that followed was broken by the distant sounds of cheers and murmurs. The representatives from all species, even those who had once dismissed the humans as reckless, were beginning to understand the magnitude of what had just occurred. Tom met Carr's gaze and smiled, not with triumph, but with the warm, fierce light of someone who had fought for every inch of their identity. The hunt is not the only way to power. Sometimes, it's the courage to face the impossible and make it your own. A deep rumble rolled through the Dreadwraiths, not of anger, but of something akin to respect. Carr's eyes flickered with the shifting colors of recognition and something else, a promise. "You have changed the way we see the universe, humans. We have no choice but to stand beside you as equals." The chamber erupted into a cacophony of cheers, gasps, and whispers that spread like wildfire. The humans, their clothes torn and their bodies bruised, stood together, an image of unity that would be remembered for generations. And as the echoes of the Trial of Fire faded, the galaxy knew that a new age had begun. The day humans made apex predators their dinner guests would mark not just the end of an era, but the start of something even greater.